Hello, everybody. My name's Jim, and this is a spoiler-free review of As Familiar as Family by Nicki Pappas. As a disclaimer before I begin the official review, if you didn't watch my February wrap-up for this year, I do actually know the author. Nicki and I went to school together for a short time, but we have not been in contact with each other for many years. And honestly, I think it was about a month ago that we caught up because I saw that she wrote this memoir. And I told her immediately that I was super happy for her and she wanted to catch up. So the two of us got on FaceTime and we caught up. And honestly, we just talked about the book and all of its intensity. It was so fun to catch up. I told her while we were talking that I did have some reservations before buying the book because, first of all, I knew that if it was good, I would want to review it. And here I am. I'm reviewing it, so I think it's a spectacular book. But I also worried about the validity of the review, at least from the eyes of everybody else, but this was genuinely a 5-star read for me. My last reservation, and probably the one that worried me the most, was that I was going to find out about something that my friend struggled with, that she went through. The Nicki that I knew, the Nicki that I went to school with, was just this fun-loving, energetic, extroverted, super funny, super friendly person. I mean, of course, I would have no idea that all of this stuff was going on in the background, but it still hits really hard when you find out that your friend was struggling and you had no idea and there was nothing that you could do about it. That was a big worry of mine. I think that she approached this memoir with a tinge of humor. There were many parts in here where she cracked jokes. The writing style, the way that she wrote, was very to be continued, like, just wait, there's more. I really enjoyed that. I liked being pushed forward through her narrative and through her story. But I did worry about that. But I am sitting here today happy to have read it because there were a lot of similarities in her experience in the church that she attended and my experience with my church. So it was a book that resonated with me. It was a book that I could relate to. I need to review it because I think that this is a read that is important enough to be viewed by a lot of people. And I really hope that this memoir, even though she isn't a celebrity or well known, I hope that this puts Nicki on the map in helping people identify where certain churches struggle in promoting and perpetuating certain ideologies and systems that we really need to squash. But before I get into all that, I do want to talk about one of the hardest parts of the memoir that I had to read. This was the baseline to how Nicki felt about herself going into the church and how people perceived her. And that was the fact that she was SA'd when she was super young by people that she should have been able to trust, with people who were supposed to take care of her. These were family members, okay, that took advantage of her and treated her horribly. These actions that were committed against her were carried with her for many years. She somehow found herself in this situation multiple times, not through fault of her own. She was just a kid. She was just there, and this stuff was happening. There was nothing that she did to encourage or influence these behaviors. So I do want to make that really clear right off the bat. And I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit. These men and these boys kept taking advantage of her. And over time, when you have this pattern of things happening to you, you just start to believe that this is what it is. Maybe this is how it's supposed to be, which, let me just repeat, it's not. And you can see early on how these dangerous behaviors even affected her healthy relationships. It wasn't until she was invited to a church that was being built from the ground up that the actions of these men in her past were validated and justified, because in the church there was a I'm sure there was a Bible verse. I can't remember it, and it's probably good that I don't, because I think it's important that when you guys read this memoir, you see the origin of this sort of belief. But it essentially continued the cycle of self doubt, self hatred, when it was taught in the church that women are, at their core, temptresses. It caused the men to treat the women with such disrespect. Not only did the men in the church not really speak to women, but it was taught that if they were left alone in a room with the woman, then the woman would be so tempting for that man that he couldn't control his urges. But even the women in the church believed this. And of course, when Nicki was attending this church, she was single and she was looking for Mr. Right for herself. And you could just think about how difficult that would be to have that mindset, not only about yourself, but about the other women and how you perceive them as competition. It was just so dangerous to think that you could be in a room with a man, he could have the sudden urge to do whatever he wants, he would do it, and you would still be blamed for it. And just saying it out loud, I'm struggling because it makes me so angry, and I can't believe, those words are coming out of my mouth. But you hear this happen all the time. This isn't just an isolated thing. This happens every day, all the time. And with this memoir, you kind of get an idea how this way of thinking is nurtured. And even more importantly, how the Bible is used to do this. Because of that, it validated all of the abuse that Nicki had to endure. It taught her that she was the problem. She sees herself as a temptress too. She's just being taught that, oh, all of this stuff happened because I am who I am. I was cursed from the moment Eve took the fruit. I think somebody actually told her that. And there was another Bible verse that they repeated constantly. I wish I could remember any of this word for word, but I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit. But it was around like, wives submit to your husbands and husbands love your wives. That sort of thing, where there was this idea that women were always supposed to just listen to their husbands and submit to them no matter what they decide. It's and I don't want to like compare it to this sort of situation, but I remember reading in Unfollow that they also used the honor thy father and mother verse in the Bible to justify their abuse and them telling the children that they need to believe what the parents believe or else they are not honoring them. It's sort of that same situation in this case, where the women are supposed to submit and just agree to whatever the men say, or else they are not following the Bible as it's written. As someone who knows Nicki, and as someone who knows a little bit of where she is now, after our FaceTime, I am happy to say that she does have a husband who treats her as an equal, and I think that even he, as you could see in the memoir, even he had to adjust to that way of thinking. And trust me, I was cheering for him just as much as I was cheering for her, because it's so nice to see people learning and people growing and people realizing, oh, it's so much better this way. You know what I mean? And I do want to give this message to some people who believe that when a man gives, quote, the bare minimum, that it shouldn't be celebrated. I tend to disagree with that, because if he is a man who is used to being in charge and following this patriarchal ideology that women need to be submissive and that men are the decision makers, if they submit to their wives, some people may see that as a bare minimum. I see that as a win for women and men, because you're finally seeing each other as equal. You can take equal responsibility for things. All the pressure is not on you. As a husband and as a wife, you are supposed to work together. This is something that I believe could be learned from same-sex couples, because if there were gender roles, then we would be screwed. So I do not see, quote, the bare minimum as something to laugh at or to make fun of, especially when some men are learning kind of for the first time to submit to their wives from time to time. I think that's a win, because you cannot expect someone to continue to grow and change if you laugh at them when they make these strides, no matter how small. Kind of in the same vein of submissiveness was the leadership in the church. It was a situation that basically put women in their place, which is what any dangerous system likes to do. And I remember in the church that I left that there were some people who had this same thought, that women were not allowed to lead. And if I could just tell you a little something about my church, we had a TWA of like 44. So we really didn't have room to discuss whether or not a woman could lead, because we just did not have enough people who were willing to lead in the church. So if a woman wanted to step up and she wanted to be part of a committee that made decisions for the church, then she was going to be part of that committee. There was really no discussion around it, and yet still people had a problem with it because of whatever scriptures they read in the Bible that said that women were not meant to lead. And both when it comes to my situation and also the situations that happened in this memoir, there is this blurred line where it's kind of like, who is really teaching the message here? It comes to a point where, is this the real teaching, or is it the person at the pulpit who is enforcing their law on the congregation and making it seem as though the Bible tells him so? I've only brushed on the topics that are covered in this memoir. Just reading about Nicki's journey from beginning to end and how she was able to figure things out on her own, because like I said, all of these beliefs were thrust upon her at such a young age. Oftentimes, like, I think about people who believe certain things, and it's like that's all they know. So it takes a lot of effort to dig in deep and realize that things just aren't right, and do your research and discover just how worth it you are. If Nicki's watching this, she just needs to know that she is so worth it. She is so worthy, and I am so proud of her for writing this memoir and all that she's been able to do. And I think, again, that this is a very important thing to read, just so you can sit in the church and really think about the ideologies that are being spread. Obviously, again, this isn't an attack on Christianity. This isn't an attack on men. But I also don't want people to read this memoir thinking that they are not part of the problem and that there is nothing that can be fixed. Because as humans, we all have something that can be fixed in ourselves and in what we believe. And I think that this gives a pretty good guideline for what to look out for in a space that is built to be safe and welcoming and hopeful. And if you see any of this toxic think in a space like that, just question it. Don't be afraid to question it, because nobody should feel that they are isolated or othered. This is a memoir that I struggled even wanting to review it, just because of the subject matter and how close it hit to home. But it did make me feel that I wasn't the only one who felt that isolation in a place of worship. But I don't want to ramble anymore. I don't want to start talking about my situation too much. I want to keep this about Nicki and her work. So if you guys want to read this, as always, there is a link in the description to its Goodreads page Go there, click on the retailer of your choice, and purchase it from there. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.